The meager resource of the timing belt, only 60,000 kilometers, is perhaps the most significant drawback of all engines. In addition, Tag AZ in the latest service menu has completely reduced the replacement period to 50,000. We always change the belt with rollers, and on a V6 engine and with a pump, it's rarely enough for the second term. Serious units with a volume of 2.0 and 2.4 liters have another toothed belt. The drive of the right balancer shaft, the left one is rotated by the gear on the toe of the crankshaft. This belt must also be changed. In this case, it is important not only to install the toothed pulleys according to the marks, but also, by unscrewing the plug on the block and inserting a mandrel into the hole, orient the shafts with the counterweights down. Some would-be mechanics forget about this little detail, which is why the engine begins to shudder and tremble from second-order vibrations. More noticeable shocks, already from a first-order imbalance, will be felt during interruptions in spark generation, which can arise not only from the spark plugs, but also from the coils. Fortunately, the neutralizer treats excess fuel at the outlet fairly, which, however, does not give a reason to delay replacement. No fatal consequences for the neutralizer were recorded on the V6 either. Here the cause of interruptions is most often in the spark plugs, or rather in the carelessness of some masters who do not change them in the far head. After all, to do this you need to remove the intake manifold, a lot of work. Therefore, they change the spark plugs only in the near head, and simply wipe off the dust from the second, creating the appearance. It is clear that the candles do not go away for the second period. Take the time to check for tool marks on the fasteners, or better yet, put hidden marks ahead of time. For example, tie the manifold to the engine with a barely noticeable thread. If it was torn off, then the spark plugs most likely were changed. On engines of the Bega series, 2.0L, we adjust the clearances in the valve drive every 90,000 kilometers. However, they do not go away very much, and even then, on average, only for a third of the valves. The mechanism is similar to our 8s, we change the washers on top of the pushers. For the remaining units, iron gore size-taters work in the drive. With the chain driving the exhaust camshaft at the rear of the engine, there are two of them on the V6, problems are extremely rare, but by 150 to 180,000 it can rattle. Do not delay replacement, otherwise you will have to update the sprockets too. When draining the coolant, resist the temptation to simply remove the cap on the radiator. In fact, it is disposable and is not sold separately, so for a trifling part you will have to replace the entire radiator. It's better to suffer by draining the liquid through the lower pipe. Solvent, which is often used to wash injectors, is rarely needed by Sonata engines, just like the washing itself. In general, the units are not critical to resins in the fuel, and no cases of valve sticking have been noted. Dealers only recommend flushing for preventative purposes, every 40 to 60,000 kilometers. The clanging sound of the suspension at 60,000 kilometers is most often caused by wear of cheap stabilizer bushings. Racks, bones, often live up to 100,000. At one time, the leaders changed the lower ball joints en masse under warranty, and cases are known even in the second thousand. Obviously, a defective batch of parts reached the assembly line, because after replacement the balls served the usual 100 to 120,000 kilometers without any complaints. The weak link in the rear suspension is the sailite blocks of the upper arms and shock absorber struts, which sometimes begin to knock after 60 to 70,000 kilometers, but if you constantly overload the car, the trunk, wow, even less. But the stabilizer bushings are long-lived, up to 120,000 you don't have to worry about replacement. Front brake pads last 20 to 30,000 kilometers, automatic, manual, discs, twice as long. Rear pads last for 60,000, discs for 120,000. With drum mechanisms, there are many such options, respectively, 70 to 80 and eternity, that is, the dealers did not recall a single replacement of drums due to wear. The power frame of the body is supplemented in the trunk with a removable amplifier. We highly do not recommend driving without it in order to increase the usable volume. The rear window may crack, there have been cases. However, the hump will have to be dismantled when you need to get to the fuel pump. And they do this more often due to the fault of alarm installers, who, without further ado, simply wedge themselves into the power circuit. Fuel supply failures often occur due to alarm glitches. It's better to immediately find and carefully redo the places where the twists are made, so as not to have to worry about it somewhere far from civilization.